Hello and welcome to the Stories That Shape Us podcast. My name is Joanna Daniel. In this episode of the Stories That Shape Us podcast, I have a really interesting, important conversation to have. One that I've never had before, I've thought about, but I'm really glad that I was contacted by our guest and the conversation that we're going to have. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and just tell us why you felt that this was a conversation that was necessary to have now. Welcome, Sharina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sharina. I live in Preston. I contacted Joanna the early hours of the morning, I think. And it just kind of, I was watching her podcast and I thought to myself, I've never seen anybody talk about it from domestic violence from the perspective of a child who's not experienced it, but who's lived through it.
Mm.
So I just thought maybe that's why this thought has popped into my head. Maybe God is telling me, directing me to talk about it. And that therefore contact Joanna, who was very receptive to us talking about it. So here I am now.
Yeah, and I think when I saw your message this morning, well, it wasn't this morning, was it? It was a couple of days ago. I thought it was just such an amazing um I think definitely let's have this conversation because as I said, I've never told it from the child's perspective. I've heard it many times, privately in therapy, but I've never had anybody tell it. And I've never indeed, the podcast has been going on for 2 years this year, I think, and I've never told it. So I'm really interested to hear your perspective, Sharina. Where would you like to start? What would you like to say first as you're telling us about the child's perspective of domestic abuse?
I want to start from the fact that the abuse is initially it's my mom's story in which obviously I'm intertwined throughout the story. So I've actually got my mom's permission to talk about it in the first place.
Hmm.
And that's important for me to let everybody else know that I haven't just,
Mm.
I'm not here just to chat my business.
It's so funny you should say to track your business because that's how we feel, isn't it? What happens in this house stays in this house has been inculcated into us. And so you're saying, I'm not just here to chat my business. But while your mom have a story, you also have a story. Each child that live in a home where there's a domestic abuse have a story. And while you might be telling it from like the adult perspective because it happened when you were a child, there is a story that is yours. Like, how did you feel when you witness it? If you witness it, when you hear about it, when you hear it happening, what was that like for you as a child having those experiences?
And something that I feel is important for parents to know is that as a child, you can look at your child and they think that it doesn't affect them. There's no alternative behavior, nothing wrong with them. They don't see it. But in years to come, this will affect that child or children in
Hmm.
different ways as well. So
Hmm.
they might not be angry, but they might become depressed, or they might become lonely, or they might show emotional symptoms that you're just like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
I'll be pinned back to that point in you might not think that a child isn't seeing it, but a child sees more than we know and than we allow for.
That's true, because lots of people will say, I was trying to keep it away from the children. Is it possible for a child to live in a home where there's domestic abuse and not be impacted?
No, because a child may not see it physically, but a child senses things.
Yeah.
And as a child, you can sense tension. I know that there were times when I could sense something was off between my mom and my dad.
Mm.
And it wasn't like my earliest memory is of my dad and my mom and dad having an argument, and then my dad turning on my mom and physically abusing her.
Hmm.
And I think I was 6, 5, 6 at the time, and that's my earliest memory.
Your earliest memory. What did the 5-year-old do when that happened?
I was in the bedroom with my brother and my sister, and we were just stood by watching it because that we couldn't do anything if we interfered.
Yes, of course.
We would suffer the brunt of the consequences of his temper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was just a bizarre moment to think that that's my earliest memory, and my earliest memory is traumatic.
Yes, yeah. So that's so important to know. You said that's my earliest memory and it was traumatic. And I imagine as a child, you can't say anything, you're watching it happen, you can't talk about it, you learn to internalize it. You learn to shut it down, the feelings.
It was, I think from that point, I began to, to kind of take responsibility of keeping my dad happy.
Oh, wow.
If my dad was happy, then he wouldn't be abusive to my mom. He wouldn't be angry at my mom or angry at my brother or angry at my sister because
Mm.
I never suffered physical abuse, but everybody above me did.
So as a child, you learn how to take care of a parent. So because you couldn't make I mean a child can't make an adult not abuse the parent. But as a child, you felt that responsibility. You felt maybe if I do something, he will stop doing what he's doing.
It was, I think at an early age, I learned to sense when my dad was upset or angry because he was a drinker as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was putting back a few, I would know that that time I'd need to step up my game and just be exorbitantly happy with him because I knew that if my mom came home, my mom didn't have to do anything. My mom just had to breathe, and all of a sudden he was just the violent side would just come out.
Yeah. It's so important that people hear that, Sharina, because there's so many times, in the context that we work with Christian women, so many times a woman would be asked when she disclosed what happened, what did you do? And sometimes, with church, she would be sent back home to go be better so that her husband wouldn't abuse her. And you're saying, my mom didn't have to do anything, she just have to breathe, and that would be enough for him to harm her.
It was a case of he had now as an adult, I can look back and say that my dad was very damaged and very broken,
Mm.
and that then led to his behavior. But as a child, you're just seeing your dad being angry and taking out his frustrations on your mom.
Yeah, but that's what he did. As an adult, you have that explanation now, and you can offer that kind of empathy or understanding. You can put it in a wider frame as an adult, but as a child, you don't have those kind of understanding to know. But I want to go back to something that you said, Sharina. You said that I was able to sense when he was angry, and I knew I had to step up my game to make him happy to protect my mom. And that level of hypervigilance, I know go with us through life. Is that the case with you? Did it follow you through life where you're hypervigilant to different situations?
I am very hypervigilant to different situations, especially one regarding my family.
Mm.
I I am the person I will fight for anybody in my family
You're still
because
caretaking.
for me, you can say or do anything to me, but don't you ever come from a family. That's a different story.
Mm.
And I'm the same with all of my family, including my siblings, my mom, and even my dad, because I think it's strange to people when I say that I grew up with domestic violence, but in the end, when my dad died in 2019, it broke me.
Of course. Of course it would. It's still a
It was,
parent that you lost. But who takes care of you when you take care of everybody else?
I think it's a case of I've got friends
Hmm.
and my mom.
You allow friends to help to take care of you and your mom does. Because again, I know that when we've been a caretaker our whole life, it's really difficult to accept support. It's really difficult to share how we feel. It's really difficult to allow anything in because we've been the one giving for so long.
And it took years before I realized that that was the case. I think when I was 16, I had a nervous breakdown and I tried to take my life.
At 16.
And it was then that I realized that I needed to talk about what I was going through because I had never talked to anyone
Hmm.
about my emotions, things that I was feeling. And it was then that I asked my mom, I started asking my mom questions about
Yeah.
when we were younger, when we were growing up, why did she stay? Why
Mm.
did she allow dad to treat her like that
Mm.
and not leave? And it was, I think, through asking those questions, me and my mom's relationship became so much more close knit
Yeah.
because I gained an understanding, more of an understanding instead of at the point when I was a kid, I actually I didn't respect my mom. Even though I would defend her, I didn't respect her because he was the one who was telling me that you never, if anybody ever hits you, you hit them back.
He told you that while he was hitting your mom. So because your mom didn't hit back, you lost respect for her.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was, and because I never understood as a child why my mom would stay,
Yeah.
because I love my dad. I was daddy's girl. But
Mhm.
for me, I still couldn't reconcile the fact that my mom was saying being mistreated like that because I'm
Mm.
supposed to respect myself if I'm looking at to my mom and my mom isn't respecting herself.
To your child's mind, she wasn't, and you felt like that wasn't worthy of respect because to your mind, she wasn't doing that. I think that is such an important piece to pull out, Sharina. The way he was, the dissonance I imagine for you, but you didn't know that was what that was. So here is you learned how to gain his approval. You learned how to appease him, to make him happy, as you say. But what that did was damage your view of your mom and what he was doing. So almost make it okay. Because he was saying, don't let anybody hit you and you don't hit them back. So to your child's mind, therefore, so nothing's wrong with what he's doing. What mom not fighting back is the real issue here. But as you grow older, you understand better.
I I understand why she stayed, why she put up with the behavior, and I think towards the end, just before my dad walked out on us in 1994. He didn't walk out on us, but he left. It's a hard thing to explain, but he left in 1994, and it was just before then my mom started to fight back.
Just before then.
So, but she fought back, so we were seeing her fight back, but I think that she may have been fighting back even before then, but
Oh
she
yeah.
never.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. That you guys weren't seeing. And I maybe even staying was fighting back because she was staying, most women stay for the children, not themselves. So she wasn't staying because she wanted to or, any of those things. Most times women stay for the children. How am I going to manage with the children? How are the children going to cope? And most times women put themselves through a lot for their children.
It's it's ironic looking back on it now because my mom has never said a bad word about my father ever at any point in time. She allowed us to grow up and form our own opinions.
Mm,
Even when he left, she never said anything negative about him. She was always like that. So, father, we have to love and respect him. And I think it was easier for me to love my dad because I was the youngest. So
mm.
at the time, I have a younger brother who was born in 1991, but he wasn't around for the brunt of the abuse.
Right, because he left 3 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always say to myself, when I was younger, I I was I found strength in the fact that I was I thought that I was doing something
Mm,
to stop my dad from abusing my mom. So that's where I found strength.
yeah.
Even though in my head I didn't really have it wasn't like it was a lack of respect, but I didn't really have a close relationship with my mom.
Mm,
And looking back on it now, it was because my dad I was so close to my dad. It was that literally you could, wherever you saw my dad, you would see me right behind him.
But I mean, that's difficult for a
And
child, isn't it? You can't be appeasing one father, one parent, and then grow closer to the other. It just doesn't work like that. That you would be close to mom because of what he was doing, and you were just trying to keep yourself safe. I do not want to get any of those the hit that everybody else is getting. So let me be a good girl. Let me be nice. Let me do all of this so that I don't get let I don't want to be in the crossfire. So I'm not surprised that you weren't close to your mom.
it was looking back on it now and how my relationship has grown so much with my mom. It's it's strange for me to think that I was so close to my dad that even now there are things that I find out about my dad that I'm just like, oh, I thought it was dad who did that first. But then I'm realizing that no, it was just my clouded judgment, thinking that
Um,
it was dad, but it was actually mom who was doing all this
mm.
for us as kids. And it's very weird looking back on it now because now I'm just like, how much of my past do I remember correctly? And how much of it is sugar-coated by what I went through?
The rose glasses that maybe you wanted to see your dad through because that kept you safe, and you're wondering how much of my past is impacted by not by that because I didn't see him as clearly as he was, or the situation. As children, you can't see the situation as close as you as clearly as you could. But one of the things I'm taking away from this, Sharina, is that when children are in abusive homes, they're forced to take a position sometimes. And often they will not take the position with the victim, they will take the position with the perpetrator because that's the position of strength. Otherwise,
Yeah.
they might be in the line of fire.
And that's something that there wasn't one time in my childhood that my dad ever raised his hand to me
Mm,
because I learned early not to do what my brother and sister did to set him off. So I was self-protecting myself as well as protecting my mom.
of course.
So I took on so much responsibility as a child that when I look back, I think, oh, I had a great childhood. But now when an adult, I'm just like, did I actually have a childhood or was I too busy being so mature and grown up that I miss my childhood altogether?
Yeah, the 5-year-old made a decision and followed through with that decision, but missed a lot of things because the hypervigilance of he's coming home, what do I need to do? He drank, he's angry. What do I need to do to save myself and to save my mom? So you would miss a lot of childhood doing that.
And it was so easy to blame myself when he did react, when he
Hmm.
became abusive, when he was taking it out on my brother or my sister. And I was just like, I didn't do my job that day.
Oh,
Obviously, I failed at the one job that I've given myself to do.
oh, I can imagine how much pressure that is that you feel you failed because an adult is making a decision about the emotions that they're choosing and how they're choosing to act, and you blaming yourself. And I'm listening again thinking, it just I feel the lack of awareness for the adults who they can't see what was happening. You couldn't see, you feel special and favored, and maybe your brothers and sisters not liking that because they're being beaten and you're not, and your mother is being beaten and you're not, and he allowed that because maybe stroke his ego because you didn't make him the others didn't make him hit them. They didn't. He chose it. He chose to not manage his emotions. He chose to use temper in ways that was destructive to other members of the family. It wasn't because they did anything or you not do something. So it just was it's so interesting the dynamics that is happening there and some of the things that you're highlighting that children are experiencing while they're living this day by day.
it's so easy for a child to blame themselves
Mm-hmm.
and start questioning what did I do or run into the day and think, oh, if I didn't react this way, if I didn't do this, then he won't be like this. Or
Mm-hmm.
if I met him at the door and I was more happy, maybe he wouldn't be as reactive.
Mm.
And I'm here to tell every single child or every single adult who was a child who experienced domestic violence in the home, don't blame yourself. It
Wasn't
is
your
never
fault.
your fault.
Wasn't your fault. It's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. And women blame themselves too for keeping the children in the situation longer, as long as they do.
It was the way how I look at it is my mom stayed because my mom didn't have anybody else. Montserrat is a very small island,
Mm-hmm.
and her family members were very mean-spirited, and they weren't there for my mom. So my mom was literally, it was like my dad saved my mom, but then he also then turned on my mom because of his demons that he was dealing with.
Yeah.
But I don't say that to excuse him, but I remember a cousin of mine saying to me that I can't blame my parents because they couldn't give me what they weren't given.
I don't
So when
know. I mean, you see, I take a deep breath because I'm like, it's not necessarily blame, it's an acknowledgement of what wasn't and the work that you have to do when you didn't get what you should have had. There's still work to be done there.
I I guess I never really looked at that in that perspective
Mm,
because I've always tried to figure out why he was the way how he was.
mm,
Because in the last years before he died, my dad did a complete 360.
mm.
Was that the way how he was with his grandchildren wasn't the way how he was with his children.
Oftentimes that happens.
And it's like he completely forgot about everything that he put us through.
Hmm.
And I remember I was talking to my pastor one day about it, and he was like, I'm going to have to forgive him
Mm.
without him acknowledging that he did anything wrong. Because if you ever bring up anything about the past to my dad, he would always be like, or he always thought he was the perfect father, the perfect partner, he was the perfect man.
Not interesting. That is so interesting. And I always struggle with the you have to forgive. I believe in forgiveness. I believe that the Bible says we should, but it's when somebody else is saying you have to. It's almost like let's rush through what happened and get to this place where everything can be neat and tidy. And that's a journey, and the journey isn't neat and tidy. The journey of acknowledgement, of awareness, of acceptance, of just sitting with the fallout of what they didn't do or who they were. That's a journey. It's a messy journey. It's complex. It's layered. So it's not just that you have to forgive and that's it. Everything's fine. You can just put a bow on it and move on. It doesn't work that way.
I think for my pastor, he was referring to the fact that I was very angry at my dad and I couldn't figure out why. And he was just like, he he kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that
Mm,
I was holding on to anger from when he was abusive.
okay.
And it was, for example, it came to a head one time when he came by our house and he was shouting at my mom. And I just instantly saw red. I was just like, don't you ever speak to my mom like that. And he was walking with us, walking stick at the time. If it wasn't for my mom, I would have beaten him with that stick.
You'd switch position now.
And I grabbed the stick from him and I was just like, don't you ever speak to my mom like that. Respect my mom because this isn't your house. And my mom was just like, if it wasn't for my mom shouting my name at that point in time, I would have happily. It's like I left my body
Mm.
and the person who was there was just this young child who didn't know anything better, but was just reacting to a situation that she was put in.
And also, I'm thinking you were defending her in a different way. When you were younger, you defended her by being nice and appeasing. And as you grow older, when you had strength, you were going to defend her in a physical way, and that was different. I
And
didn't.
it was just so it I felt like it was my mom protecting me at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I had beat my dad, one, I would have had to have lived with that. Two, I would have ended up in jail.
Mm.
And three, I probably wouldn't have been able to stop once I started.
All the anger
So
from childhood would probably come out.
exactly.
Hmm.
So it was just like I was dealing with a lot of issues and I couldn't figure out where they came from. And I was so angry that my pastor helped me to see where the anger had come from. He was just like, I am going to have to forgive my dad, but he meant in a sense that I'm going to have to forgive him without him acknowledging what he'd done
Did that
or
help?
how it affected me growing up.
Did that help with the anger?
It did. Because if I hadn't forgiven my dad, then we never would have had the relationship that we had
Right.
when he,
Tell us about the journey of how forgiving him helped you with your anger. What was that journey like?
it was, it was a difficult journey because I'm a person who believes that to forgive somebody, the person has to acknowledge
Hmm.
what they've done. And when you forgive somebody, they need to at least be sorry for the way how they impacted you.
Not always like that.
And to forgive somebody without them acknowledging it was just like it was very alien to me.
Yeah.
And I was just like, but how can I forgive him if he doesn't acknowledge what he's done?
Hmm.
He's not seeking forgiveness because he remembers our past in a different light.
Mm.
And it's that point when I realized that forgiveness wasn't for him, it was for me.
It was for you. Okay.
Forgiving him meant that I would allow myself to heal. I was slowly letting the anger go,
Hmm.
especially because the person who was in front of me wasn't the person who I was angry at. So it was a juxtaposition. So it
Right.
was like I could see him being the same person, but he wasn't the same person in his behavior.
Right. His behavior had changed by that time, but the child who experienced it, those things, those experiences still lived in you, and that hadn't changed. Mm.
And it was very difficult to forgive him. And I don't know where I took the strength from to forgive him because when you see him, it was people would think that butter wouldn't melt.
Yeah.
He's just got that face and that smile that everybody always remembers.
Usually they're nice, aren't they? Nice, very nice people.
And it's just like part of the thing that helped me forgive him was when I started to understand what he went through as a child, not as a
Right.
child, but what he went through as a child going up into adulthood, and the fact that he never dealt with any of those issues of abandonment from his own mother. And the fact is, his own mother didn't want him.
But it's sad that he took that out on his wife and children.
But then I also realized that his abuse was his way of protecting. He was very controlling. Like when we finished school at 3 o'clock, it took 15 minutes to walk home. We best be in the yard at 15, quarter past 3. Otherwise, we'd get yelled at. My brother and sister would get beaten or something because I was the younger one at the time. So they were babysitting me.
Mm.
So anything that I did wrong was always their fault.
Oh, I just I know a lot of people use that model, but it just doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, that's harmful.
Exactly.
How did that impact your relationship with your siblings?
got relationship.
Ah,
I didn't have a relationship with my siblings growing up.
mm-hmm,
I feel like I grew up with siblings who hated me. And I feel that that's why I'm such an introvert because
mm,
I spent so much time on my own and I had to become comfortable with my own company.
yeah.
Otherwise, I would drive myself insane.
It's the enforced dysfunction that, your dad's behavior ha brought in the home that impacted the relationship between you and your siblings.
And I know they never understood why I didn't get beaten the way how they got beaten
Yeah.
and how anything that I did wrong was always their fault.
Have you
So
ever
they
explained it to them that I was just trying to appease him and I figured out how to be good so that he wouldn't hit mom?
know.
So the impact is so to it impacts everything, doesn't it? It's impacted your relationship with your siblings. It impacted how you saw your mom in those early days. I'm sure how you see yourself. How does it mirror in other relationships in your life?
I don't allow myself to get close to people because I think if I get close to anyone, then I'm opening up the door for somebody to hurt me. Or the fact that I am such a loyal person, I will put myself on the
Hmm.
bottom and let in defense of somebody else, but
Mm,
that somebody else may not want to defend me.
mm. And people will defend you, and there are many people who will love you enough to look after you and not hurt you. But I'm hearing so many things happen for you as for, the 5-year-old who made that decision, who have lost so many things, who have lost so much. You lost out on a relationship with your mom, maybe in those early days. You lost out on a relationship with your siblings, and now you're losing out on relationships in adulthood because of the fear. The man that you said you were close to, because you developed that, because you learned how to do it, his behavior taught you that maybe people can't be trusted and I can't allow anybody in because if I allow them in, they will hurt us. So there's so many things happening all at once in that one because of that one, his behavior, his actions.
And it's funny, I see red flags in everything people do.
Yeah.
And I don't see red flags that can be changed to green. I just see red flags. And as soon as
Mm.
I see a red flag, I'm gone.
Oh, don't hang around when you see red flags for sure. Don't do that. But again, Sharina, you are processing, you have forgiven, you'd made the journey to have a relationship with him when you were older and he was older. You saw the difference. He was changed. Sometimes they tend to when they're older. But again, you're sitting with the real impact of his actions, and those have not changed, despite your journey to forgiveness, despite releasing your anger, despite him being different with his grandchildren. The fallout of the abuse still is the impact of that is still happening today.
And I always tell people my dad taught me the kind of man that I don't want in my life.
Not at all.
So his red flags growing up, his behavior, whatever he did, I learned that it taught me that that is not the kind of guy that I want. So as soon as somebody shows anything that may imitate, that may trigger something, I just I just wash my hands and I'm gone.
Close off.
My walls go up. I delete the number, I block them. I just refuse to have anything to do with them.
If they show any signs that they look like him.
Yeah.
Mm. The thing is, I was gonna say I hope people listening will see this and what's sad is that the perpetrator tend not to watch the podcast. And who we're talking to here is the choir, meaning the woman who is experiencing abuse often is the victims that will watch the stories that shape us podcast. I'm hoping that people will who are supporting people, pastors and leaders in churches who are supporting women, who are listening to women, women with children will hear this and not and can make some different choices around what they tell women to do, what they tell victims to do, what they send victims home to do, knowing that this is lasting a lifetime in the child's life as you're sitting with and you're seeing and you're watching the confusion and the decisions that you made at such a young age that has affected you the rest of your life. This is not, the abuse is not something that we want to take lightly.
And something that if you're in a relationship with an abusive man, then and you have kids, you're teaching your female kids that that's how a man should treat you, and then you're showing your male kids that that's how them as men should treat other women, and that's something that people need to realize because they believe that kids don't see anything, kids are affected because they show no signs now, but kids will when they're older and they've got a relationship of their own, and then their wife or partner might then turn around and say to you, well, they're abusing me or this, whatever, you might not want to believe it because you're just like, they didn't see anything, but
Hmm.
they perpetuate what they learned and they learned it from somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody's getting an education. But I just want to say on women stay for many reasons. It's so complex. It's so complex. What I do know for sure is that nobody wants to be in an abusive relationship. Nobody. And so staying is layered, it's complex. Everybody wants a place of safety to go to. Some people don't feel like they have options and choices, and some, as we know, stay because of the children. They need their father or financial reasons. Where would I get money? All of those things. Sometimes women stay because of shame. I will be shamed. I will no longer be accepted because they're women who are ostracized after they've left, you know? So there are many, many reasons. And so we work to educate the community, we work to educate the church about abuse, and we work to provide safe spaces for women to come and talk about where they are on that journey, wherever they are on the journey. We're able to listen and to hold space with them as they make their own decision and transition into whatever it looks like for them. It's not easy.
It definitely isn't easy. And one thing I can say to women who are experiencing or living with abuse, if you've got kids, never believe that the kids won't show signs of something at some point.
Yeah.
And staying with the kids, staying for the kids isn't reason enough to put yourself in danger because there is hope out there. There are people out there who are willing to help. You
Yeah.
just got to be persistent, I guess.
I love that you said that. And as we round up, I want to say there is hope. There is hope. Oftentimes, what I hear over the years is that, there's a fear of what will I do next? But there is hope. There are people who will help you. There are people who are prepared to help you. So don't be afraid to reach out for support, ask for help, ring the police, ring the domestic abuse helpline. There's a national domestic abuse helpline. I'm going to put it in the description of this video that you can ring at any time and you can get support and direction as to what to do. At Wounds to Scars, we're also putting together a pack that victims can use as a resource, like which banks you can go to, what the railway companies are doing, if you're fleeing and you don't have money, and things of that nature that people can do to get support and get help. Thank you so much, Sharina, for sharing your perspective as a child and the impact that abuse has had on you, living in an abusive home has had on you. What would you say if you were to speak to a father that's doing that? What would you say to him?
I would say to a father, remember the fact that you are setting an example for kids, for your male sons, for your female, and the treatment that you give to your wife now is what you are actually portraying to them that it's okay.
Yeah.
And would you be accepting of that if it was your daughter getting abused from a guy?
Mm.
And
Mm.
you need some self-reflection to understand why you're taking this toll or whatever is this anger
Mm.
out on your partner, because just because your partner breathes the wrong way isn't a reason enough for you to react the way how you do.
Nothing is a reason enough. Nothing is a reason enough. Nothing, you know. But thank you so much for for sharing that, for coming and again sharing your perspective on domestic abuse. October is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, and we're closing out this month with with the conversation with you, Sharina, sharing the perspective of abuse from through the eyes of a child. And I'm grateful that you've come and shared your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Stories That Shape Us. I hope you'll join us on the next story.